Welcome to Blind Emojis Icons for Visually Impaired People. In this book, you will learn how our project started and how it works. In Chapter 1, you will find a small introduction to the project. In Chapter 2, our research. In Chapter 3, the happy tone. In Chapter 4, the relaxed tone. In Chapter 5, the serious tone. In Chapter 6, the sad tone. In Chapter 7, the intense tone. And finally, in Chapter 8, the Blind Emojis products. We want to give a special thank you to Elisabetta Corradin, Christian Fuentes, Rossella Bertolazzi, and Edward Bates that guided us and helped us the whole way. Chapter 1, Introduction. This chapter includes the brief of the project, analysis of visual impaired people, and the problem we based ourselves in. Blind Emojis is an experiment to connect visual language and visually impaired people. Feelings are the core of any visual perception. In the 21st century in written communication, it is the visual language that sets the tone of voice of a text that is communicated through emojis and typography. The people who use Braille are forced to use the letters of the alphabet to set the tone of voice or describe their emotions. This became the starting point to design icons as an addition to the traditional Braille alphabet. We designed 5 tones of voices: happy, relaxed, serious, intense, and sad that are converted into icons. To avoid confusion with the traditional Braille alphabet, this icon addition is developed in the same grid concept, preserving the same size vertically plus 1 line horizontally for a better understanding and readability. The World Health Organization, WHO, estimated that globally, at least 2.2 billion people have a near or distance vision impairment. In at least 1 billion, or almost half of these cases, vision impairment could have been prevented or has yet to be addressed. One of the biggest obstacles in everyday life as a person with visual impairment is the ability to communicate effectively with others. Consider the visual clues that we look for during a conversation. We give facial cues, which indicate mood or emotion we show. Hand gestures, which can indicate size or direction, even turn-taking cues, including raised eyebrows and, of course, feedback such as head nodding. These types of nonverbal messages may be lost or misunderstood by people with poor vision. Both people in the conversation are then prone to misinterpretation. Imagine not being able to see someone roll his eyes when making a sarcastic remark. You might think that he is rude, and he might think that you don't have a sense of humor. It is also important to distinguish between different kinds of visual impairment, as each type causes different problems that require different solutions and changes the contextual information necessary. About 15% of people who are visually impaired cannot see anything at all. The remaining 85–90% may have residual vision or others types of low vision and may have difficulties with color, light, form, or movement perception. Is graphic design for visual impaired people? To convince people that inclusivity is something we are responsible for is easier said than done. When we looked into this, we found that there are 2 very basic ways in which to approach disabilities. The first is a medical model, which views a disabled person as having a problem, and it is within that person that we find a solution to the problem. Since we are not qualified to utilize that model, we are going to go deep into the opposite approach to disabilities, which is through society. That is called the social model by viewing disabilities through this lens. We see that there are issues within the structures of society. We believe that through this lens, designers can offer their services to create equal opportunity for people of all abilities regardless of their impairments. Is Braille still relevant? Even if blind people get a lot of use of their phones nowadays, Braille is always there. Think about the daily life of a person who sees. The phone is crucial, of course, but writing is always present and irreplaceable. It's the same with Braille. Christian Fuentes, graphic designers overlook the needs of visually impaired people far too often. It's our job to find ways to improve their quality of life as we do for people that can see. We shape the way people see the world. Visual. Impaired and blind individuals are particularly dependent on their hearing and tactile senses, which can be an advantage in the graphic design world. They don't see a product, but they touch it and hear it. This project, besides facilitating the daily life of blind people by giving an experimental solution, is also here to prove that we can see through other senses. Chapter 2, the research. This chapter includes the synesthesia chart, study of feelings and colors, study of the sounds, study of patterns, cross-sensory perception chart. We designs a cross-sensory perception chart, where is shown the experience of one sense via the physiological stimulation of another. The word has been variously translated as synesthesia, co-sensation, or co-representation, which is the condition that causes one sense to be perceived as a different sense. Feelings and colors. What color do you associate with the word happy? Yellow, right? Let's use another word now. The word success, what color evokes in you? Have you ever asked yourself why it's so easy for some words, but for others, it's harder? Here's where subjectivity and perception come into play and make it harder to associate. Colors are used as a channel of communication. They help to visually search quickly, show associations, to improve user experience and evoke emotions. The meanings associated with certain colors can be quite different depending on the culture, but some of them are also universal. Colors in culture. Different colors have different meanings across the world's many cultures. The Infographic Colors in Culture by London-based designer David McCandless and Always with Honor Studio encompasses 62 different meanings for 13 colors across 10 cultures. While analyzing the infographic, you will realize the importance of color and meaning and how different colors convey distinct meanings for cultural cues such as intelligence, danger, wisdom, and authority. For example, the word love across different cultures have different associations. In Africa is blue, in Native American yellow, in Western European red. For our thesis project, having in mind the complexity of human culture and its influence on perception, we decided to analyze just the Western American culture approach to the correlation of colors and feelings for the final step of the correlation of colors and feelings with our project. We selected the colors yellow, green, gray, blue, and red, which are the ones used in our particular experiment. The sounds. The relationship between a visually impaired person and sound is unique, close, and especially strong. Whenever we correlate color and sound, a process called synesthesia happens in our brain in which two senses are blended in an individual. The research we have included on this correlation is based on the study made by Alexander Scriabin that developed a mapping between discrete pitches and discrete colors based on his experience with color hearing is a particular example of synesthesia. This is a model of cross-sensory perception in which certain individuals experience one sense via the physiological stimulation of another. The word has been variously translated as co-sensation, imagination, or co-representation, a condition that causes one sense to be perceived as a different sense. Scriabin perceived sound as color and developed a mapping system called Clavier Lumi Res, which means keyboard with lights. Are you able to associate colors to sound? Yes, for example, red is an intense note. Yellow may be softer. Black has a low bass. White a really high pitch, etc. For the sounds, I think you should just use the primary base colors, because if not, some notes can be too similar, for example, red and dark orange, etc. Christian Fuentes. Starting from the colors that we have been working with, a melody correlated to each specific color was created. The sounds are approximately 30-second melodies based on a structure that starts with a specific note, based on Scrabian studies, which develops into a melody. This aims to transmit the feeling of the specific tone of voice. The combination of these songs and the textures aims to create an intense visual experience, using the senses of touch and hearing. Based on our survey, 19 out of 20 people associated each melody with the color and feeling that was based in the patterns. Can you associate certain patterns with colors? We perceive every pattern immediately. The eyes of blind people are their hands. This is also possible regarding the color association with the shape, even though in those specific cases it's a bit harder and it requires more concentration. Some blind people have those senses more developed and do it immediately. But for the rest of us, it is possible with a bit of study. Christian Fuentes. So, how would you explain color to a person who has never seen it? With a feeling or object they can relate to. We wanted to create a possible solution that is as effective as possible for the person who will use it. We created a set of 5 icons associated with general tones of voice. This is to avoid committing the mistake of having too many complex symbols that, at the end of the day, would complicate matters rather than simplify them. The icons are also based on an organic association between the specific color and feel of an object. For example, green is immediately associated with the grass texture. The Colors in Culture Braille book made by Matteo Alabasio is the result of a brief that focuses on how design practice can extend across disciplines to help create innovative approaches through them. Use of infographics. This was supported by a personal interest in developing alternative approaches to the presentation of 2D media and engaging in memorable user experiences. Working closely with Edward Bates, a member of the NNAB, the Norfolk and Norwich Association for the Blind, Braille development was tested through a thorough user-oriented process where Edward and Matteo tested a series of pattern papers and processes to achieve the desired infographic outcome based on the textures and patterns that were revealed within the embossings. Edward was born blind. Therefore, the patterns selected were chosen under 2 principles: what feelings they evoked and which patterns were easy to distinguish between one another. The result is a 98-page bound book, where each page represents a feeling and emotion. Based on this, we selected 5 specific patterns from his research to analyze, since they are the ones we want to transmit through our tone of voice. The base grid is designed based on the classical Braille 6-dot grid. Our grid has an extra line, 9-dot grid. This extra line is placed horizontally, 3 extra dots to the right. This is because readability for blind people is crucial, and expanding the grid vertically would negatively impact the flow, readability, and printing efficiency of the icon. Chapter 3, Happy Tone. This chapter includes this tone of voice through the color, feelings, sound, and pattern. The pattern comes from the association of the color yellow with a light ray, following the symmetrical square grid. Happy is a tone of voice based on the intercorrelation of color, feeling, sound, and texture. This specific tone of voice is based on the association of words that Western American culture connects to the color yellow. The 6 dots work as the starting and ending points of the finger movement. This 30-second melody starts with the note D, also known as R-we, which is based on the Scriabin's key-color relationship with a frequency of 18.35 Hz, followed by a melody that evokes a happy feeling. Chapter 4, Relaxed Tone. This chapter includes this tone of voice through the color, feelings, sound, and pattern. The pattern comes from the association of the color green with grass, while following the symmetrical square grid. Relaxed is a tone of voice based on the intercorrelation of color, feeling, sound, and texture. This specific tone of voice is based on the association of words that Western American culture connects to the color green. The composition is based on 3 straight vertical lines and 2 diagonal lines on the y-axis. The 4 dots work as the starting, pauses, and ending points of the finger movement. Point number 2 to point number 3, reading from left to right, is represented by the precise shape of one grass stem to make it even more readable. This 30-second melody starts with the note AI, also known as La, which is based on the Scriabin's key-color relationship with a frequency of 27.50 Hz, followed by a melody that evokes a relaxing feeling. Chapter 5. Serious Tone. This chapter includes this tone of voice through the color, feelings, sound, and pattern. The pattern comes from the association of the color gray with a square, following the symmetrical square grid. Serious is a tone of voice based on the intercorrelation of color, feeling, sound, and texture. This specific tone of voice is based on the association of words that Western American culture connects to the color gray. The composition is based on 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. The 4 dots work as pause points for the finger movement. This 30-second melody starts with the note E, also known as Mi, which is based on the Scriabin's key-color relationship with a frequency of 20.60 Hz, followed by a melody that evokes a serious feeling. Chapter 6. Sad Tone. This chapter includes this tone of voice through the color, feelings, sound, and pattern. The pattern comes from the association of the color blue with water, following the symmetrical square grid. Sad is a tone of voice based on the intercorrelation of color, feeling, sound, and texture. Culture and colors. This specific tone of voice is based on the association of words that Western American culture connects to the color blue. The composition is based on 2 triangles side by side facing down to the right corner. This position emphasizes a low, unenergetic, sad feeling. The 3 dots aligned work as pauses between the triangles, waves, to guide the finger movement. This 50-second melody starts with the note F, also known as Fe, which is based on the Scriabin's key-color relationship with a frequency of 21.83 Hz, followed by a melody that evokes a sad feeling. Chapter 7. Intense Tone. This chapter includes this tone of voice through the color, feelings, sound, and pattern. The pattern comes from the association of the color red with a cross, following the symmetrical square grid. Intense is a tone of voice based on the intercorrelation of color, feeling, sound, and texture. This specific tone of voice is based on the association of words that Western American culture connects to the color red. The composition is based on a cross, 2 diagonal lines crossing each other vertically, and 2 horizontal lines that contain the cross inside. The 4 dots work as starting and ending points to guide the finger movement. This 30-second melody starts with the note C, also known as Do, which is based on the Scriabin's key-color relationship with a frequency of 16.35 Hz, followed by a melody that evokes an intense feeling. Chapter 8. Blind Emojis Products. This chapter includes Braille usage, book covers, music styles. What would be a practical daily life use of the icons? Thinking about your goals and the current use of Braille, you can implement these icons by using them on book covers to understand the genre. I'm sure that more than once you have judged a book by its cover and realized its genre by looking at it. For us, this is not possible, and more than one time this has happened to me. Once I read 30 pages, I realize it is a completely different genre than I thought. Another aspect you can work with is the music genres. For example, I have a lot of vinyl records, but no one has ever made them easier for us blind people to read and choose from. Christian Fuentes. The Braille usage. Now, the tone of voice of a phrase can be communicated effectively, no matter with which sense is perceived. The upper phrases both have the tone of voice communicated visually through the emoji, while in the lower phrases, the tone of voice is communicated through the icons with the sense of touch. Book covers. With books, we can usually get the basic feeling of the story from its cover. This is something that visually impaired people can't do. We created a way for visually impaired people to select and understand better the books that they are holding. Music styles. It's the same with music. We all have a preference for music genres, and there is just something beautiful about going to a record store or market and choosing a new vinyl record or a CD. This is something that visually impaired people also want to do. By learning how to use our icons and the sounds that go with them, they can feel immediately which music genres each record or disc belongs to. The icons products examples are a way to prove that these icons, more than a product, are a system. A lot of things can be applied to this structure to facilitate daily life of visually impaired people.